Support weapon stratagems are one of the most powerful tools that a Helldiver has at their disposal. And with the arrival of the new Illuminate threat, it's more important than ever to understand which of these tools are actually going to serve you and which are going to get you killed. It all begs the question, which of these support weapon stratagems are the best and which are the worst? Dr. Pooplove here, and that's what I hope to find out. In this video, I will be testing each of the support weapon stratagems versus the Illuminate and ranking them on a tier list, with S being the best and Poop Hater being the worst. Starting with the MG43 machine gun, which is a medium armor penetrating fully automatic rifle with a large mag size and a stationary reload. And what was kind of a middle of the pack meh type gun for the bugs and the bots is really perhaps one of the best support weapons you can have with you versus the Illuminate. This of course just mows down the voteless horde, taking them out very quickly and essentially making them a non-issue. But this also will make quick work of the overseers, including inflicting a good bit of stagger onto them, as well as with the medium armor penetration being able to headshot them. Versus the watchers perhaps is where this is at its weakest, because while it does take them out quickly, the handling can be a bit rough on this, so just bear that in mind. Regardless, the fast firing bullets are just great on this front because they deal with the shields of the spaceships as well as the shields of the harvesters. Now, because this is a medium armor penetrating weapon, you can also use this to take out the harvesters from their leg joints and do so very quickly. One downside this does have is it does have that stationary reload pattern, which basically has two phases, and that means you can partially reload and save your progress. If you need to run away, you'll still need to reload the other part when you get to safety. But one way you can circumvent this is by reloading while using a jump pack or just using the siege ready armor set to reload a bit faster. In general, this gun just feels like a perfect match for the squids, and so we're going to be starting off strong with this list. I gotta say, I think this is an S tier gun for the Illuminate. Next up though is the APW-1 anti-material rifle, and this is a sniper rifle with high impact heavy armor penetrating shots, and this also does pretty well versus the Illuminate. While it may be a bit of a waste to use your sniper bullets on the voteless horde, this can excel at anything higher. Watchers take about 2 shots, overseers seem to take about 3 body shots or 1 headshot, and the harvesters this can be pretty great for. Taking off their shield generators quickly and just pumping shots into their armpits feels really nice. You can also use this to take shields down pretty quickly for your spaceships, but it might be kind of a waste of shots to do so. I also like pairing this with the jump pack and taking to the roofs of the city buildings, getting some good sniper angles. I like this, so I will be giving it an A for the squids. But now for the M105 Stalwart, which is a light armor penetrating assault rifle with a large magazine. And versus the squids, this just feels okay. It does mow down the voteless horde very nicely, especially with the large mag size. This can help a lot. And it can also take the watchers and the overseers out pretty decently, but it does not have the medium armor penetration, so you will need to go for the body shots on the overseers. This also won't be that great for the harvesters, although it can take their shields down fairly quickly, but it doesn't seem to be able to take their shield generators out, and that kind of sucks. This can also take the spaceship shields down pretty quickly as well. To be honest though, it's just kind of hard to recommend this over the regular machine gun, which just has overall more usefulness. The main advantage of the Stalwart is you don't really have to stationary reload, but I don't think that's too much of an advantage. I could see you using this though if you wanted to use the crossbow or the eruptor as your primary, but I just didn't find that it was that great, so I'm going to be giving it a B for the squids. Now for an interesting one, we have the EAT-17 expendable anti-tank, which is an expendable rocket launcher with a very quick cooldown time and 2 launchers each time you call it down. Now versus the squids, this honestly just doesn't have a lot of use. It doesn't do enough damage to one-shot the flying saucers that come around and spawn enemies, so that's kind of out of the question. It's also a bit too big to want to really use or waste on anything like the voteless or the overseers. Now it can be fired into the spaceship doors to take those down, but plenty of things things have that ability, so I'm not sure that's really going to be a major benefit here. Now, this can two-shot a harvester, and that really is the best function of this thing. But I do question if it's really useful using up an entire stratagem slot just for this, especially when you can find some of these EATs lying around the city. Ultimately, there are better options that serve similar functions to this that we will be discussing, and for that reason, I just really feel like this is just not good enough for the squids. I'm not really a fan, so I'm going to be giving it a C for the Illuminate. All right, so next is the GR8 Recoilless Rifle, and this is the gun that gets me the most in trouble. This is an anti-tank rocket launcher similar to the EAT, but it actually does more damage. It does have a backpack for ammo and programmable ammo to switch between splash and anti-tank damage. And versus the squids, this actually does have some good uses. This is one of only a few support weapons that can actually take down the flying saucers with a single shot, meaning when the watchers call for reinforcements, you can serve as the denial. Also, this can one-shot a harvester when its shields are down, although not totally consistently. I believe you will still want to try to go for that armpit area in order to maximize damage. It also has its HE mode, which is more of a splash damage mode, and you can potentially use that in a pinch in order to clear out a big horde with the more spread out splash damage. But to be honest, I don't know that I would waste precious ammo on that. Now, for the spaceships, I thought maybe this would be able to take them out in one hit or maybe even two, but that's just not the case. This still has to be fired into their doors, but it can be used for that purpose if you want. Of course, the recoilless does have some other drawbacks. This will take up a backpack slot unless you can convince some fool to carry it for you. And I, for one, happen to like using backpack slots to give me other advantages, so it can be hard to sacrifice that for me. Of course, without a buddy helping you, it does have a pretty slow stationary reload pattern, and that can be tough to manage versus a horde rushing you, but you can do this in phases, and I do find it easier to get a reload in than versus the bugs. All in all, while maybe not as personally as big of a fan of this weapon, I can recognize this is still solid because it does allow you to fill a role in being able to dedicate yourself to deleting the harvesters and flying saucers, essentially some of the most dangerous things that can hurt your chances of success in a mission. Being able to take those out can be a huge success, as well as doing things like being able to take down broadcast towers. Filling that role alone, I recognize, can have a huge impact and can cause missions to be much easier and be even emptier. So I will give it an A for the squids. But let's turn the heat up on this next one because yes, we have the Flam 40 Flamethrower, which spits fire out to the enemies, which can light them on fire, and it will have a damage over time effect. And versus the squids, this is amazing. The fire damages the horde super well, and you can even light the ground on fire. It will stay lit for a while, so anyone walking by can get caught on fire, and that can be super effective. The flames also take out the overseers very quickly. Now, the main struggle on this thing is it can be hard to get the elevated overseers who like to keep their distance, as well as the watchers who both like to keep their distance, but also seem to be slightly fire resistant. But the flamethrower can take down a harvester very quickly, and it even kind of just ignores the fact that they have a shield. I very much like to take this with me on the battlefield versus the squids. I find it very strong and very amazing. Now, you may be okay with just a torture or a crisper. I like those as well, but this is still stronger, and so I think it's really good. I'm going to give it an S for the squids. But now for an all-around favorite, the AC-8 Autocannon, and this fires fast explosive rounds which can be modified to either shoot more powerful targeted explosives or flak rounds for more spread out explosions. And it does have a stationary reload pattern, but it is relatively fast as long as you have some ammo. And versus the squids, this is very solid, as it is with all factions. The AFET rounds can be great for taking out the overseers, taking about 2 shots, but these are also very good for taking out the harvesters as well, even causing some stagger and good damage, especially if you aim for the joints. Now, this isn't really that great for the shields, but as long as you have something that can take those shields down on the ships, you can also use this to shoot into the doors and take them out. This also has its flak round ability, which can be great for the voteless horde horde, taking a lot of them out at once with these very expansive explosions and wiping out a good number of them. This is all around very solid, and so again, I'm going to give this an S for the squids. But moving on, we have the MG-206 heavy machine gun, and this is a machine gun with tough handling, but it inflicts heavy armor penetration. And this does have a stationary reload pattern, but it can also be fired at various speeds, which you can adjust depending on your preference and ability to stabilize your aim. And versus the squids, this does do fairly decently. Versus the horde, it can take them out quickly, but the handling can be a little bit rougher, which makes it a little bit harder, although the peak physique perk can help. This also does have that stationary reload pattern, so you do need to just prepare for that, finding a safe spot in order to reload, although again, you can do this while jump packing. This will do well against the overseers, but again, with the tougher handling, be prepared that it may be a little bit harder to get on target when dealing with the elevated overseers and the watchers. This perhaps shines the most when facing off against the harvesters, as this will take down their shield very quickly, as well as their shield generator, but also you can shoot just right at them, just like right in their face, and still take them out pretty quickly. You still probably want to go for their leg joints if you can, but it's nice that you can just go anywhere and take them out without needing to be as precise. All in all, it's decent. It's still a little bit harder to recommend over the machine gun, but it won't steer you wrong. I would give this an A for the squids. Now, this next weapon we have has a bit of a reputation for killing not only your enemies, but also yourself and your teammates. Of course, I'm talking about the RL-77 airburst rocket launcher, and this is a launcher which shoots out essentially a bunch of cluster bombs that can be used to clear a wide area, and generally is only really going to be effective versus groups of enemies clumped together. And versus the squids, this can handle the horde fairly decently, but there are a lot of caveats. For one, you do need to be far away from your targets, because the risk that you will get killed by your own bombs or your teammates is quite high, as the clusters will often somehow find its way to your face. The other thing about this is it reloads pretty slowly, but technically, as you should be farther away from your targets, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now, there are two modes for this. There is a cluster and a flak, and to be honest, it's pretty difficult to notice much of a difference here, but based on the patch notes, it says that the cluster bombs get armed at a slight delay, which should make it less likely to blow up in your face, and I did find this to kind of be true, although it will still happen if you are too close. I would generally probably just leave it on cluster only when you're using this, but I would still proceed with caution. Now, the paradox here is that the hordes of enemies that need to be far away from you in order for you to use this don't often really pose that much of an immediate threat. So it seems like there may not be that many chances to really get good use of this, but it can be used if you know there are groups of enemies in a place you are trying to get to, like if you're trying to clear out an objective area before you arrive. Now, that being said, I don't find this useful enough to really want to be my preferred stratagem in order to serve this function. Like, you could just use a barrage in order to clear an area you're trying to get to, or an eagle cluster bomb, which would probably be a little bit less risky and also not require you to take up a backpack slot. I don't know, this does feel improved. They've been trying to improve this, but to be honest, I still kind of think it sucks, and I'm still going to give this a poop tier. It's poop, straight poop. So can't deny it. But the next weapon is great for the fans of Arnold, and that is the MLS-4X Commando, which is a disposable launcher, sort of like the EAT, but this one shoots out little rockets that do less damage instead of one big explosion. And it also has a slightly slower cooldown time. But versus the squids, I really quite like this. The rockets can be called down to take out elite enemies pretty easily, and the cooldown is still pretty low, so you can call them down pretty often in order to help you out. You can use this to take out the harvesters pretty decently with this thing. It took me an average of 3 shots, which left me some shots to spare. You can also choose to use this on overseers, taking about 1 to 2 shots in order to quickly take them out. And with the laser guide, you can actually guide the missiles with your laser in order to redirect the missiles and hit targets, especially moving targets. Another great aspect of this is one shot of this thing thing into the door of a spaceship can take that out, and 4 shots of this thing to the underside of a flying saucer will take those down. This is very solid and versatile, and you can feel empowered to use it for a number of different functions. It's one of the reasons why I think the EAT is just not something you should take, because this exists and it can allow you to do so much more and have more options at your disposal. For that, I will give this an A for the squids. But now for the formerly meta RS-422 Railgun, which is a very high damaging anti-tank gun that if you have in your unsafe mode, it can do a lot more damage the higher you hold it down, for the trade-off of, well, exploding on yourself if you hold it down for too long. And versus the squids, I had been hearing that this is a bad gun, but I gotta say it's better than I think people have been saying. Having this in unsafe mode is pretty essential, of course, but you can use that to one-shot the overseers in their heads, or seems like just a couple to the body. Of course, you can one-shot the watchers, which is nice, and even though this isn't really the best or maybe recommended for the voteless horde, a single very powerful shot will actually penetrate through multiple of them, basically in a straight line. So if you have a horde chasing you, you can fire directly back and wipe everything out in that line. This perhaps does shine the most when facing off against the harvesters, as it will take them out pretty quickly as well. It will take their shield generators out in one charged up shot, and it will get them from the joints in about 3 to 4. Overall, this is decent. It's not the most effective. It doesn't shine perhaps as much as it shines on the other 2 factions, but I can see this being used. I'll give it a B for the squids. But the next gun on this list is the FAF-14 Spear, and this is essentially an auto lock-on weapon that fires super explosive anti-tank rockets. And versus the squids, this is pretty good. This will one-shot the flying saucers and will do so without requiring you to aim, so that's pretty nice. It also will one-shot the harvesters, which can just delete them from the map. Now, those are its 2 main functions, as it doesn't really work on spaceships, and I wouldn't really recommend, it's kind of a bit much to use versus the overseers. That may make you ask yourself, is it really worth it to take this and sacrifice a backpack slot? But if you want to satisfy that anti-tank role, you can do so pretty nicely here. And although this doesn't have that many uses, it is very consistent, so that can be a good reason to take this out. Although I will say there are other options like the recoilless and even the next one I'm going to talk about, which do have a little bit more versatility. For that reason, I think this will get a high B for the squids. But moving on, we have the Killzone themed weapon, the STA X3 W.A.S.P launcher. And this is sort of a mix between a spear and the Commando. And this basically fires small missiles that can be auto-locked onto targets. And this also has the ability to fire individual missiles out in bursts or one big missile. And versus the Illuminate, this one is definitely very interesting. The voteless horde are really too small for this, so you shouldn't really worry about trying to take them out with this, and that's understandable. You're going to want to go for something a bit bigger. Using the burst fire, it can actually be pretty great and useful versus the overseers and even the watchers, just instantly taking them off the map. Now, you can just hold this down to release a bunch of rockets at once, but I feel like it seems to work a little bit best if you kind of slow your firing down and just kind of try to fire one at a time. Now, for the spaceships, this doesn't really seem to do anything notable. The bursts don't go into the hole, and firing on it doesn't really take the shield down, so I wouldn't really use it for that. It's also not going to be good for the flying saucers, as it doesn't seem like it really has the ability to take that down. And another downside is you do end up facing the Illuminate a lot in the city streets, and the projectiles kind of go out in these little arc-type patterns, and they end up hitting the buildings instead of your intended target. So you do need to make sure you kind of have a little bit more of a wide angle in order to use this. One thing that I found interesting was I was expecting the artillery fire to be the mode that you should use versus the harvesters. But to be honest, when I use this mode, it really was quite rough. I couldn't even get them with my full supplies. I kept reloading and it just took forever to take them out. But when I just used the burst fire on the harvesters, it actually performed really well. You can even use it when the shield is up, 2 bursts to the shield, and then you can even single fire the rest in order to take them out without even needing to reload. Or if you're in a pinch, you can kind of spam these, but it will take you about 3 reloads. So I didn't find that to be very efficient. Single firing bursts onto the harvesters seem to work the best and seem to work very well. I found this to be very good. Oh, and by the way, I did find a pretty good use for the artillery function though. What you can do is use your artillery versus an overseer who happens to be in the middle of a bunch of voteless. If you do it that way, you can actually take the overseer out as well as a lot of the enemies that are surrounding it. So at least it does have one good function when using that mode. For all this, I do find this to be pretty good. There are some inconsistencies, some downsides, but there are a lot of very strong capabilities of the W.A.S.P, and so I'm going to give it an A for the squids. But now for the GL-21 grenade launcher, which is a grenade launching gun with a fast fire rate that launches grenades in an arc for high explosive damage. Versus the squids, this does have some pros and cons. The grenades make quick work of the squids, splash damaging multiple at a time, although those grenades may bounce a lot, so you can end up missing quite a bit. This also has the ability to two-shot the overseers, and that's definitely nice. Of course, it will be a little bit tough versus the elevated overseers and the watchers, as you will need to lob your shots for them, and so it can kind of feel like a waste to try. This, of course, will take out the spaceship once their shields are down by shooting into their doors, and it can also take out the enemy Tesla towers too, which is pretty useful. What surprised me here is it seems to do nothing at all versus the harvesters. Shots at the armpit don't seem to get hit markers and don't even stagger them, even though the grenades from the grenade pistol do and the grenades from the crossbow do. The grenade launcher just doesn't happen. That definitely is going to lose some points for this one, especially the thought that this just feels weaker to have on you than a primary or even a secondary. It's definitely not a good look. Ultimately, it's just generally hard to recommend this when you have other grenade weapons that exist and are just going to be stronger. So ultimately, I'm going to give this a C for the squids. But the next important weapon on this list is a cannon that fires a laser beam that can light enemies on fire. Of course, I'm talking about the LAS-98 laser cannon, and versus the squids, this can do very well. The laser lights the voteless on fire and takes them out very quickly, especially if you hover your aim around their head level. Likewise, this will take the overseers out pretty quickly, especially also if you go for their heads, which will crumble off very quickly. Watchers also go down quick, and what's also great is this can be used versus the harvesters. You can use this to damage their joints, and it will also have the added benefit of lighting them on fire for a bit. This isn't that great for the shields, but it's very strong versus most everything else, and the infinite ammo is certainly welcome. This honestly felt really good to use. It's good versus so many things, and I see myself taking this out versus a lot of the other ones, so I'm going to give this an S tier for the squids. Now you might be shocked to find that the next weapon on this list is in fact the ARC-3 arc thrower, and this is a gun that shoots out lightning that can chain to multiple enemies, and versus the squids this can be pretty decent. The arcs will travel to multiple of the voteless horde, knocking a lot of them out and staggering others. One challenge that I did find, however, is sometimes these guys tend to rush you and the arcs don't always go to the near guys, instead they opt to go for the farther away guys. So you will just have to bear that in mind. This does do a good, decent job of also staggering and hurting the overseers pretty nicely, putting a lot of them out of commission for a while, and that definitely can feel nice. Watchers as well can be stunned for decent effect. Now for the harvesters, this can also stun them for a bit and throw them off their main move, but it's going to take a while in order to actually knock these guys out if you want to just use the arc thrower itself. All in all, I found this to be solid. Of course, the infinite ammo is definitely nice too, and it can be an easy way to kind of rack up the kills. It's not my favorite, but I think it still deserves some points. I think it will get a low A from me. But now we have the LAS-99 Qasar Cannon, and this is another anti-tank that launches a rechargeable laser explosive similar to what the EAT can do. And versus the squids, this is just okay. This is not at all something that you should use versus the horde, but I guess in a pinch, since you have unlimited ammo, you could use this on an overseer, and that will for the most part get them with one shot. This can also be used to blow up the spaceships once the shields are down, so that can be a nice touch. Unfortunately, this won't be very good at all versus the flying saucers, as a shot to the underside will damage it, but it won't destroy it, and the recharge takes too long, you won't have enough time before that ship has flown away. Perhaps the best use case for this is when taking out against the harvesters, and it seems to take about 3 shots at them when their shield is down. But to be honest, it's not too great because of the recharge time, and especially because you have much quicker options at taking them out. All in all, I just was not impressed with this, especially I feel like it doesn't really provide that much strong impact to you on the battlefield, and so I'm going to be giving it a C for the squids. Now, next up is the TX41 Sterlizer, and this basically operates like a flamethrower, but instead it shoots out a toxic gas spray instead of fire, and that spray will cause corrosive damage to enemies as well as confusion. And for the squids, I was actually very disappointed at how this works. Now, gas as a tool has grown on me a bit as a good mechanic. In particular, the gas grenade is really good, but I was pretty sad to see that the sterilizer just kind of sucks. This can distract the Illuminate a bit, but part of the problem is it takes a little while in order for the gas effects to kick in, and those effects don't seem to last that long. So for the voteless, if they are nipping at your toes, you can't really spray them and get results too quickly. And while it will distract them for a small tiny bit, it wears off very quickly. So you just don't feel like you did that much. It's the same thing with the overseers. It feels as if it takes even more gas, and very shortly after, they are back and trying to get you. In that same time, you could have done so many different things to actually have a better effect, and that can be kind of frustrating. The harvesters, it's really the same deal. I wish this could at least stop their ray of death, or at least have them not pointing it directly at you, but it just doesn't work that way. What I think would be better here is if the sterilizer left little gas clouds that actually lingered a bit in the area, rather than just gassing up individual targets, as that seems to be why the gas grenades do so much better. Because while the targets are in that area, they are constantly being gassed and constantly having that effect on them. As soon as you leave a gas area, the effects kind of wear off quickly. And so I think having something to kind of leave those effects on those targets a little bit longer would be a better use case. Unless that happens though, it's pretty bad. I really don't recommend this, and I would flush this down the pooper. This is poop tier versus the squids, in my opinion. And here we have the list. Here's where the support weapon stratagems rank versus the Illuminate. But what do you think? Where would you place these weapons on this tier list? Let me know in the comments down below. And for more Helldivers rankings, you should check out this playlist where I rank many other aspects of this game. But otherwise, thank you to my YouTube members, and so long, Pooper Troopers.